We are activating your unique self-discovery one show at a time. The Orchard of Wisdom Self-Discovery podcast are at your fingertips, just waiting to inspire and invite you in discovering just how awesome you really are and how to navigate through life in joy, enrichment, personal abundance, in mind, body, spirit, heart, and soul. All the people we bring you are here to serve you on your journey of life. Do enjoy our next show. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of An Author's Kiss, right here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy, and my guest today is Anika Savoy. We're going to be talking about her new book, The Ghost in Her, talking about an asylum, the New York Asylum, the history of it, and that if you were a clairvoyant person, a seer, then they would lock you away. She's got a lot of research here, but the story is about a beautiful young woman, Maggie O'Connor, an Irish girl, that wishes that she didn't have psychic abilities, because coming from, the Irish female seers, she didn't have a choice, but faced with caring for her departed sister's orphaned baby, Maggie struggled to pay the rent while working for pennies in a local brewery sweatshop. Her life goes from bad to worse, and then a wicked neighbor steals the baby. Well, what's this got to do with the asylum? Well, we're going to be talking all about that today. We're going to be talking about lunacy, what used to be called lunacy, and how easy it was just to lock people away. And have you noticed that they used to lock a lot of women away back then? Very, very easily. All a man had to say is that she has hysteria, and off she was locked away. Now, I'm going to apologize right now, folks. Sorry, I am sick. So I have a coffee voice here today. If you ever see me coughing in the video, but you're not going to hear me, don't worry, I'm not having a fit. I'm just having a coughing fit. So excuse me ahead of time. Welcome to the show, love.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm really happy to be here today.
You're writing about an Irish seer, and I come from a Celtic background as a seer, and I know what persecution can be, and especially going back 50, 100 years or more, people were drawn to them to know what
Mhm.
was going on, but at the same time, always the fear of the white coats coming to take them away. Um, so, there would be the fear of the asylum. And when you look at what the asylums were like of those days, it was just like dungeons. People just
Yes.
thrown into dungeons, along with
Right.
some people with some serious problems that really just needed some good help.
Yes, yes, and yes. I mean, you nailed it, Sarah. When Dickens wrote about the asylums of that day, whether it was in London or New York City, I mean, he really nailed it. They were horrific,
Mm,
hellish places, almost like a kind of purgatory of
yes.
lost souls, right?
Mm,
And in the case of Maggie O'Connor, the heroine of my book, she has these psychic abilities, and she's worried about two things. If people find out she has the abilities of a seer, she can see ghosts, she can see the future. They'll do one of two things. They'll either lock her up in the New York Lunatic Asylum, or they'll burn her at the stake as a
yeah.
witch.
Yes.
And it's funny
What a
because
choice.
I know, wonderful. I think I'll shut up and not tell
Yes.
anyone, right? And we think of witches as being more in the colonial period in the
Hmm.
16 and 1700s, in the Western world, both in America, but also in parts of Europe, which was true. The majority of the witch trials seemed to happen at that time. But the last witch in Ireland, in Tipperary, was burned at the stake in 1895.
Mm.
So, it was still dangerous for women in that way because you could easily be thought of having demon possession.
Right.
And
The
and
first
that
thing
all
they run to, right? First thing.
right.
Yeah, it
It's
must be
the
demons.
easiest
Mm.
thing to
Yes.
diagnose, right?
Evil.
And yes. And when it comes to the lunatic asylum, they would diagnose women who were eccentric,
Hmm.
different. Maybe they were just going through menopause.
Exactly.
I mean, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um, they would diagnose them with all of these, particularly female diseases that were related to their reproductive organs. So you mentioned hysteria.
Yeah.
That comes from the womb. It was called a wandering womb or a wandering uterus, whatever
Where did
that
it
means.
wander to?
I I guess up to her brain, and it made her all
Yeah.
crazy. I don't know. I think a lot of men back then, um, they were so afraid of women,
Yeah,
and there are
they still are.
certainly some men like that today, arguably, right?
Yes.
But and so unfortunately, Maggie does get shipped off to the New York City Lunatic Asylum, and as you know, the psychiatrists back then were called alienists. And
I
yeah,
didn't know that.
it came from this concept of you're going to audio mute me as I wipe my nose. No, you don't have to audio mute. But alienness, it comes from this concept of a human being alienated from society or
Okay.
alienated from their mind. And these men were often carried a lot of strong Christian dogma.
Hmm.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
And so really, if a woman was eccentric, if her husband was cheating on her
Yes.
and had an affair and he wanted to find a convenient way of shipping her off, you watch a show like the true crime shows today,
Yes.
and a question I'm sure you've asked that I always ask is, my God, couldn't you have just gotten a divorce?
Yeah.
Like, did you have to kill him?
Yeah.
But often, when men, especially super religious men who are very into their image in the community, they're very narcissistic. They
Hmm.
don't want to divorce their wife because that would show that they're not all that they say they are.
Right.
So instead, they decide to kill them. Well, the analog would be at the turn of the century, I can't divorce my wife. I'm a church going, upstanding man. But if I send her to the lunatic asylum, everyone will feel sorry for me.
Right.
And then I can have my cake and eat it too, and have
Oh,
my
you
girlfriend
poor
come
little
live with me.
boy.
Yeah,
Yes.
your, your wife is mad. But it's true that, a lot of the issues that women did have, and for good reason, were things that people struggle with today, anxiety,
Hmm.
panic attacks, clinical depression. And they were not treated in a kind of objective, clinical, fact-based way, because back then they just didn't have the means. They didn't have the understanding of the human brain and human chemistry, and so they were working on this botched premise of anecdotal kind of diagnoses. And it led to some horrible, horrible stories of women, committing suicide in these asylums, women being abused and beaten.
Hmm.
Or another thing is, these asylums were notoriously unclean. You
Yes.
know, so I mean, the lice, the diseases, they would actually, at the New York City Lunatic Asylum, and I assume many other asylums, they would take the new doctors, the guys fresh out of medical school who'd never operated on anyone before, and they would let them practice on the patients at the lunatic asylum. So you're getting this green guy who just got out of medical school, who's never used a knife, and he's trying to, take out your intestine kind of thing, like your appendix, and there were a lot of botched surgeries that
I
happened
know
in the
anesthesia
asylum.
back then either.
No, they would do the laudanum,
Mm.
what's it called? Morphine. Is it what's it begins with ES, where they put it
Mm.
over your
Ether?
face? Ether. There you go. Um, but those didn't last as long. So, you could wake up in the middle. But many procedures, especially dental procedures,
Oof.
were done without any kind of anesthetic, or Novocaine. Yeah.
So, folks, you're going to see if you're watching the video that we're having a few technical issues right now. It looks like she has a very itchy nose and that she's turned into bewitched and she can grant all her wishes. So we're going to just continue with the interview here and hope that that rectifies. If not, we will just have beautiful pictures up here for you to see the rest of it. Also, if you're hearing any thumping in the background, no, it's not a ghost coming to talk to us. They're actually having an elevator installed and it just happened to land on the same day. So bear with servers, because these are the things that go on in internet land. So let us continue, my dear. Yes, the persecution, especially of women. You don't hear much about men ending up in the asylum due to hysteria, or women trying to get rid of their husbands by putting them in an asylum.
Mhm.
We don't see much of that at all, do we?
We don't. And, I don't know if I mentioned that I'm a lawyer. I'm also a lawyer. And so I think some of the reason for that would be the fact that not only the medical system that was a patriarchy at the time, but also the legal system was a patriarchy. It was made
Mm,
up of powerful men who made the decisions.
yes.
And
Has that
so
changed?
well, it's really interesting you ask, because when I went, by the way, the picture of me looking like Bewitched with the little fluttering nose, that's not going to be right on right now, right? People know that.
Well, hold on, folks. So, folks, we can't beat technology when technology doesn't want to get beaten. So, from now on, you're just going to be seeing Anika's picture and her book, and we're going to continue with this show. So, we see a very misogynistic world, which is still very much so that way, and they're definitely trying to hold on to it for as much as can. But, it was an easy way of dispersing women. And the funny thing is that anything to do with the supernatural or to do with a seer, a man went to them. They kind of make it believe that they didn't, but they wanted the information. They just didn't want people to know they were getting the information.
Yes, exactly. It was very much done in secret in
Mm,
most cases, and then sometimes what would happen is there would be a seer in a community who had the best of intentions and would be a healer and tell people things to help them, but as soon as some bad calamity came over the community, whether it's an epidemic or the
yeah.
person falls into financial ruin, guess who gets scapegoated and blamed?
Oh yes.
The seer,
They
the
they
seer.
caused, the virus, the typhoid, and things like this.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
that's
Um,
right.
I've had many past lives removed from me,
Ah,
and the interesting thing is the last 50 past lives was filled with persecution, burnt at the stake, torn and
mm,
quartered, every way they could think of killing you,
mm-hmm,
I've been through.
mm-hmm,
And I had to have
mm-hmm,
that kind of released and cleansed from me. And
mm-hmm,
but it's amazing how much stays in our cellular structure. And
mm-hmm.
people get, I mean, Fayeism, being a seer is very much passed down through the family. Um,
Right.
and of memories from the past, flashes come
Mm-hmm,
forth, and
mm-hmm,
it's that
mm-hmm,
nobody chooses to be it. Even today, it's hard because you've got
mm-hmm.
so many people either capitalizing on it and changing the
Right.
whole presentation. I mean, I've been a reader all my life, and people would call me a fortune teller, and I said, no, I am not a fortune teller. I'm not here to read your fortune.
Mm-hmm,
I'm here to see your path and what you need
mm-hmm,
to do to walk on your path. That's what I'm
mm-hmm,
here to do, to give you a better map in walking
mm-hmm,
your path. And but it's still, again, it was a push and pull. I would have people that wouldn't have anything to do with me and then come to me for a reading. So
mm-hmm.
it's still got a huge
Yes.
stigma today, hasn't it?
It does, because there are charlatans out there. There
Oh
are
gosh, out
people
there.
who are, pretending to be psychic, and they're not just to make a buck. But when you talk about past lives, this is really interesting to me, because often when we go into past life regression and analysis, there's almost like a spirit of fear that we have, where, for example, with you had a long history of repetitive persecution and death for either speaking your truth or being misunderstood.
Yeah.
And I think that's a common, very common experience that especially many females
Mm,
have had throughout history. And I can relate to it myself in my own life, that it seemed like, why am I always being misunderstood,
yeah.
kind of thing, or seen as bad when in fact my intentions are good, kind of thing.
Yes.
And that's, you could argue that's karma, right?
Mm,
And Now, I was reading this great book yesterday. Are you familiar with Dolores Cannon? She wrote, well, she's passed now, but she wrote The Three Waves of Volunteers and also The Custodians. And
Mm,
she basically did a lot of work with past life regression, but more importantly, with energy forces, whether you want to call them ETs,
yes. Yep.
extraterrestrials, or beings that are from other realms. That's probably the best way to describe them,
Mm,
energies from other
yes.
realms. And what's happening, she said, when she started her work in the late 70s and 80s, is that these energy forces from other realms were saying, speaking to people in what they had intended would be a past life regression. And under hypnosis, these people start having these forces come through other realms and say, you know, we don't want you exploring any more of the past life. It's about karma and it's not taking you into the new wave of what's about to happen in our world, worldwide, the new earth that is
Yes.
coming. And we don't know when or how, but when you think of the end of the world, you think death, destruction,
Yes.
and then these
Armageddon.
cadavers from underground
Yeah.
come suddenly resurrect. Well, I think it's going to be much more of an energy situation than I mean, there probably will be a lot of destruction, but it's going to be a transformation of people's minds and souls to an awareness that we are energetic beings that never die. and
Yes.
and so she works with that realm to say, okay, the karma is something you shouldn't be too concerned with now, like what you did.
Mm.
Release your karma, release it, because you've got work to do, right?
That is 1 trillion% that not only is it the path that I'm taking, but it's numerous shows that we're
Mm-hmm,
already in that transition. There's a wonderful
mm-hmm,
Celtic room called Haglas, and it is disruption. And 5 years
mm,
ago, the universe gave me a saying: we're here to shake you up, to wake you up, for you to
mm.
step up, to change it up, and to grow up vibrationally, but also
Yes,
grow up as a human race, right?
absolutely. And suffering sometimes, the saying, what we don't learn from wisdom, we learn from woe.
Mm,
Sometimes suffering is what shakes the soul up.
yes.
Like I know for myself, I had a lot of pain in my childhood. And I credit that for making me a spiritual seeker,
Yeah.
because there's nothing like emotional trauma and pain to make you cry out to God, to cry out to the universe, to say, comfort me, help me, why am I here? Give me
Guide me.
strength, give me strength, yes,
Mm,
guide me. And the same is true of suffering. And I try to write about that actually a lot in The Ghost in Her, that the character of Maggie O'Connor is a true underdog.
mm,
And she comes from a history of physical abuse. Her father was an alcoholic and he beat the mother and the children, and she has a permanent limp in her leg because of that abuse. So
mm.
if she ever forgets it, I write, her leg will always remind her.
Right.
And yet it's sort of like she's the chosen one because of her suffering. It makes her an extraordinary vessel for to become a seer.
And that actually, we can suffer or we can struggle. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
difference. And the
Mm-hmm.
suffering is that we're in excruciating despair and pain with it, or we can change it into something, a struggle of becoming something else, of,
Exactly.
being somewhere else. And, through the years, I've been doing this nearly 11 years, and I've got to interview some extraordinary people who have had some horrific things happen to them, things
Mm-hmm.
that shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
happen to human beings. And you think this is happening still now?
Yeah.
And yet they made a choice to go
Mm-hmm.
through the process of healing, of
Mm-hmm.
struggling through that process to
Mm-hmm.
become that new butterfly of their own
Yes.
design, and then who they are today, and the
Mhm.
courage and the exuberance and the abundance and the enrichment of who they are today, and now serving others on that same journey, they all have said, I would never have changed a thing. And I
Right.
don't mean I liked the pain of the suffering I went through, but
Hmm.
it's made me who I am today, doing what I am doing today at a much higher elevation of
Right.
consciousness.
Because how can you empathize
Mm,
with other human beings, which is really what it's about. It's about connecting with other human beings, empathizing,
yeah.
because we're all on the same boat.
Yes.
We will all die one day. Look around, the little beautiful babies, children's, that they will one day die as well. And by the way, there are construction workers building an elevator in my house today. How convenient is that? So if you hear a
Oh,
drill,
that ghost, that ghost.
oh, it's the ghost. It's the elevator ghost. Um,
Elevating from
but
where?
yes, but yeah, and I find too, like I've had, as you age, and it's inevitable that you're going to have pain issues. You're going to
Mm,
have physical issues. And I was always such a strong athletic person who worked out every day and never had any pain. And, in my 50s, I started to have some serious chronic pain issues, particularly in my neck. I had neck surgery, which doesn't make writing the funnest thing in the world.
no.
But
Dictate,
what
dictate, love.
well,
Write it.
I've tried, and I think a lot of the people in your audience who might be writers will agree
Mm,
that the dictation, just for me, I need the physical act of seeing the words and
hmm.
crafting them, and the dictation often gets it wrong, so you spend more time correcting it
Yes.
than if you didn't do it in the first place.
Right.
But with the pain though, it's allowed me to focus more on my spirit and on my
Hmm.
soul.
Hmm.
And when you go to places for like physical therapy, you see people much older than you, very frail
Hmm.
old people who are not long for this world, and you see a light in their eyes, and you see that they can still laugh, that they can still love, that there's something deeper than just our bodies on this earth that
Most.
gives us purpose, that gives us a meaning to get by day after day.
Well, you said it earlier on in the interview about, men being afraid of women,
Mhm,
and especially those that were seers.
mhm.
I've had experiences in life when entered the business world for a while, where, a man would be busy strutting his stuff and talking his thing, and then suddenly look at me and go, "You see me, don't you?" and, and be freaked out because I just look at them and go, "Yes."
Yeah. Oh.
And then, because
Yeah.
everything was a facade on the top. And, one of
Mhm.
the things that we talk about in business today, and the difference of what's happening in business and corporations and even governments in some places, consciousness is rising, where it
Right.
is the investment into people, planet resources for profit, not the profit at the expense of. And that we are encouraging people to be more intuitive, to be more instinctual, to be, rise up to that higher frequency, and to be compassionate, to
Mhm.
come from that place of, heart, soul, and spirit for the
Mhm.
body and the mind to follow. And it's
Yeah.
it's beautiful to see that it is happening, because you were talking about this awakening about to happen. It's already happening.
It is.
Yeah.
And Eckhart Tolle talks about that
Hmm.
in the New Earth. And I believe these are all like birthing pains that we're going.
Yes.
The
Yes.
the war
It's an
right now.
uncomfortable pregnancy.
Oh, it's
Yes.
and it's a very scary pregnancy. You might
Yes.
lose the baby, kind
Yeah.
of thing, with
Yeah.
everything that's happening in our world today. I mean, even just the threat of nuclear annihilation,
Right.
it hasn't been as high as it now. It's about as high, or if not higher, than the Cold War.
Mm.
It's at
Yeah.
a very high time in history, and it's very nerve-wracking. I do believe it won't happen, knock on wood. But I think that this earth will somehow get through it and survive, that we won't destroy our world. But I think it's that threat that
Yes.
is also shaking us up. You
Yes.
know, like, come on, get with it. Same with
Yeah.
climate change. Climate change.
Yes.
I mean, get with it. There's going to be terrible, terrible continuing devastation
Yeah.
if we don't change our way of thinking. But you know what, Sarah, I find that something I've struggled with ever since I was a children, and I find it even more so now at the ripe old age of 56,
Still a
is
youngster.
I love you. I knew I liked you the moment I saw you. But the thing is, my thought is that human beings have a tendency to think in a linear way about
Yeah.
life. You're
Yes.
born, you do great achievements, you live by the ego,
Mm.
you make money, you are known in the community or whatever, and then you die, and that's it, and then you go to heaven. Of course, even if you're awful, but you're going to go to heaven, because even everyone likes the thought of heaven. But so that's kind of like what I grew up with,
Hmm.
is this linear view of our family is very important. We are very important. This life is everything. And when we die, we'll go to heaven, right? But there wasn't any, even though there was the institutional church, setting framework in my background, there wasn't that connection to a deeper reality.
Right.
And I would find it frustrating. Like, why do we go to the country club and golf every weekend? I mean, it just seems so pointless to me.
Yeah.
But not that's not bashing golf. Anyone
Right.
who loves golf, I'm not bashing you. I'm just saying every weekend.
Yeah.
but
Surely
but
there's
just
something else to do.
yeah, I know, but just kind of like, is your soul not hungry like mine is?
Yeah.
Because my soul
Yeah.
is really hungry. And when I'm just, say, vacationing all of the time, and just doing superficial things that keep me busy and make me happy on the surface level, it gets really old really fast.
And I
And
think
and
people
I
are hungry right now too. Their
I do.
soul is waking them up. And
Mhm.
this is why people are feeling, there's a nutrition missing in my cosmic diet, is that there is so much more to life than this robotic surface that we're living. And that
Right.
and people are beginning to realize that there is so much more out there. Now, you talked earlier about, entities
Hmm.
that come here. Now, I know I am one of those. I was one of
Hmm.
those consciousness that chose to come here.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and I came here to always ignite the heart and souls in others.
Hmm.
And through the eons, and I've been here a very, 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 very long time, sometimes I lost my way, but I've always been in that field in some form or other, and always
Yes.
the punishment or the persecution or whatever. So for
Hmm.
me, as a youngster this time, I was given illness very, very early. And I came to understand that later, that I knew later I came to understand I was this cosmic child. I lived in my
Mm.
own spiritual world. And
Mm.
other people looked to me and just thought, she's slow. There's something wrong with
Mm.
her, right?
Hmm.
Or it's the sickness. And
Hmm.
and so that, always an excuse for it, never an exploration of what plane I was on.
Right.
Right. And
And
so,
yeah, a lot of souls that choose to return, like
mm,
you, they really struggle in the body, especially in
yes.
childhood.
Oh
In
my God.
childhood,
I'm,
because
I'm,
you're like,
I'm
what?
68 and still struggling. So,
Right, aren't we all? Yeah, but I do believe that when we leave the body, we go to the realm where we belong. We
mm,
go to the realm that gives us the most freedom, and we, you read, like, in near death experiences, one thing that they first experience is no pain, because they're no longer
yes.
trapped by
Oh,
their body. And then when
absolutely.
they go back to their body, they just feel so weighed down,
Oh,
and the
much.
pain returns.
Yeah.
And I just look forward to the day when I can finally escape the body. But in the meantime, I want to focus on the spirit while I'm here.
Exactly. And, I have, and I occasionally do, but I think I'm just way too bogged down right now to do my astral travel. And
Mm-hmm.
that feeling of actually being up in the universe, you're
Mm-hmm.
amongst everything and nothingness. It's beautiful.
Yes.
It
Well,
is,
that,
there is no
yeah.
weight. There is utter peace and tranquility and support. Um, and you are just an essence. You are an
Mm-hmm.
essence, and it is so utterly peaceful. And then you come back into the body, and as you said, way down, you suddenly feel like 300 tons, and
Yeah.
everything is a struggle. And can I go back up there,
I know,
please?
please. And I did have a near-death experience when I was 17, and I was hit by a car
Mm,
when I was riding my bike and fractured my back. And that's you described exactly what I experienced.
it's
My
beautiful,
soul
isn't
left
it?
my body. It is
Oh,
a state of such peace, such love. I was neither male nor female.
hmm.
And most importantly, there was no time. There was no
No,
time. It was a timeless realm. It's kind of a staticky buzzing. But and then I opened my eyes and I was back in my body. But you often read in near-death experiences how people say, I argued. I don't want to go back.
yes,
Let me stay.
please, do I have to? They're dragging you. Yeah,
It's
your work is
it's
not done.
it's
Yeah.
like you're a homeless person living under a bridge in the winter, and they suddenly take you to a five-star resort in Greece, and you're like, I don't want to go back to the bridge. I want to
No.
stay here.
No, and unless you've been there, it's such a hard feeling to actually really truly give words to.
Mhm.
It's just that you are everything and nothing, and it is everything and nothing, and it's just beautiful. Um,
Yes, and I feel too like a lot of people who are inclined in this direction, they feel a sense of grief, like you're missing home, you're
yes.
missing your family, like all your life. I just don't feel like I'm supposed to be like there's another place that's
Mm,
more loving and more. I know that there's something better, but I forget. But I know that this is not it. And I've certainly had that kind of longing all my life, like, oh, I miss God, I
yeah,
miss my home. But
yeah,
that's why we do things like yoga and meditation and trying practicing being in the moment so that we can experience that in the body.
yeah. Presence with your essence, yeah.
Mhm.
Um, and if being for me, and because as a always being the cosmic person, when I came into the world this time, my poor mum was a week in labor with me, and
Oh,
apparently when
wow.
I was born, I was black and blue and everything, and she
Oh,
goes, all that for that. You
ah,
know? and
wow.
and then I was a happy, healthy baby up to the age of 2, and then Asian flu went round England, and I
Oh,
got that, and that brought on asthma and eczema and severe case of it. And they said, oh, she'll outgrow it. Well, that's 66 years ago, and I haven't outgrown it.
oh
And
my.
and so it was, but I came to understand. And now they gave me fibromyalgia, and I came to
Mhm,
understand why. And it's like, okay, do you really have to be this extreme? But at the
mhm,
same time, it is my cosmic energy, especially as the energies were rising. It was suddenly
mhm,
permission to be myself, permission to
mhm,
let my energy flow.
mhm,
But at the same time, it still had to be dampened so that
mhm.
I could still be that introduction to it,
Yes,
without being overwhelming people
right.
because of it. So I still can't step right into that energy because that's only
Yes,
for the higher level. And if I want people to take the journey, I've just got to give enough energy that, inspiration is begets invitation, to be that invitation for people who want to open up and ascend to that higher level themselves.
right. And something I was reading recently in the Dolores Cannon book as one of the people when the person was under in that state when they were in touch with their essence was that we don't realize that just our presence here
Mm.
is healing the
Yes.
earth. And that came as a huge relief to me
Yeah.
because I'm a type A personality. And I spent 20 years practicing law, and I was very assertive. Let's get the job done. Let's win this case. Let's make the money. And and I always felt like I had to do something or I had to say something. When you in court, when the judge says, okay, counsel, give me an opening statement. You better be on your toes and
Yeah.
do it as efficiently as possible. So that's how I think, logical. But what that meant to me when I read about it yesterday was that, Anne, you're enough as you are. You don't have to be performing.
Right.
You don't have to even be counseling or even saying something in particular. You can just be. And you know that,
Mm,
Sarah. I find it
mm,
with you right now is that when you're in the presence of someone who has a peaceful, loving energy, when they're in touch with their essence.
yeah.
And by just being in their presence, we don't understand this because we don't have a spiritual microscope. But maybe someday we will, when
But
we will
I think if we
see.
stop trying to think it, because we've been taught to
Mhm,
think, especially in the last 100 years, it's the chin up. It's only what's in
mhm,
the head that mattered. And we
mhm.
disconnected all the other intellects that are there, the heart, the soul, the spirit, the body.
The
And
intuition,
their
yes.
intuition, the entire essence of who you are that is all working with each other. I call
Mhm,
that the wisdom. For me,
yes.
as a knowingness coach, it is about allowing the knowledge
Mhm.
to come through you, to resonate in your heart in truth, to go to your spirit in action, and for your mind to know what it needs to know when it needs to know it.
Yes. And and a big part of that is spontaneity, just being
Mm.
real and being
In prison.
spontaneous.
Yes.
But you notice a lot with like the gurus in India or with Eckhart Tolle, who I adore,
Mm.
many spiritual people. You notice that someone will ask them a question and there'll be a long pause, like with Eckhart Tolle, long pause. And then you can tell he's sort of asking himself, he's waiting for the answer to come from within
Yeah.
him,
Yeah.
and
Or
he's
through
just,
him.
yes, through him. And you really sense like he's a conduit.
Yes. We all
And
are.
we are, and
Yeah.
that's what in my book, The Ghost in Her, Maggie, in one of the scenes towards the end, she loses her sister. Her sister dies in child labor in at the start of the book. So she goes underground in the catacombs of the New York City Lunatic Asylum and sees a vision of her sister at the very end of the tunnel as this radiant
Mm.
princess-like being, and just so full of love and light. And I just think that we have spirit guides, and Nessa, who is her sister, represents a spirit guide, but she shows Maggie the tree of life.
Hmm.
And she says, do you know what you are in that tree of life, of all of those people blooming and falling to the ground and new branches and leaves blooming? Do you know what you are? She says, you are a conduit.
Hmm.
And so a conduit, if you understand it at the turn of the century, helps electric lines or copper lines, it's a conduit for energy and
Yes.
electricity.
Yes.
Well, people are conduits for the
Yes.
energy,
Yes.
correct?
We are
So,
all energy. Every single particle and
yes.
everything that grows on this planet
Mm-hmm.
and in the universe
Mm-hmm.
is an energy signature.
Absolutely. Yep. Gee, I don't need to convert you, man.
Certified here.
I'm not going to make you laugh because every time you laugh, you
I know
cough.
I cough.
So
I
I'm going
know. So okay.
to.
I'll laugh and cough at the same time. I can
Mm.
do two things.
Cut your tummy too. I want you to
Yeah.
cut your head and rub your tummy and laugh and cough.
Yeah, the beauty of what I'm seeing in the world right now, and kind of the reason why I'm still around, is that I am seeing that awakening. Like
Mm.
look at you. You were a lawyer. Lawyers were
Mm.
all about analysts. How
Yeah.
can you outspeak the other person? How can you
Mm-hmm.
convince? How can you
Mm-hmm.
manipulate? Right? And then
Mm-hmm.
when you go into being that conduit and coming from spirit, coming from the wisdom of spirit, because I believe the opening up the channel and receiving is the wisdom, and it's giving
Mm-hmm.
it to the knowledge to know what to do with it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
when you open up to that wisdom, and I was a
Mm-hmm.
child that would approach people and say things to them, and they go,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, how do you know that?" I don't know. Can you repeat it? No. because I had
Right.
no understanding what I was saying, but I was saying things to them that they needed to hear. I went to my
Yes.
mum, when my dad died, I was 11. And I
Hmm.
went to my mum and I said, God took the one that was the weakest and left the one that was the strongest.
Wow.
So it was,
Wow.
that has always been there with me without me kind of um, academically understanding what I was saying, but
Yes.
intuitively always trusting what I was saying.
Out of the mouths of babes.
Yeah. But
Because children are in more in touch with the spirit and
absolutely, we're the
listen to
ones that
that
shut that
intuition.
down.
Yes.
And we mustn't, because we've got to understand that the spirit of a child that grows into an adult is
Hmm.
not only the healer, but the creation of
Hmm.
peace, of love, of a higher
Hmm.
elevation. And we've got to stop shutting our children down. I've got a book series coming out later in the year, the Forgotten Children
Hmm.
series,
Hmm.
and it's how, how we're doing a disservice to our children,
Yes.
and how we're not nurturing them and how we're not listening to them,
Oh,
because
you're
they
so
are also
right.
our teachers. And if we could
That-
just get out of our higher ego and hierarchy of
Yes.
self-importance and
Yes.
listen to the heart soul truth of a child, they
Yes.
they see things in such a beautiful way, and they're always so utterly present.
Well, I think our children right now, at this stage in history, are really emotionally neglected, and
Mm,
spiritually neglected.
very
Like
much so.
they may have all of their parents calling the teachers, making sure take good care of Johnny, make sure he gets A's. You know, they may have their helicopter parents, right? Because there are a lot of helicopter
Mm.
parents out there right now who are too controlling.
Oh
But
God.
there's a difference between controlling your child and loving and listening and nurturing your child.
Yes.
And, we see it all the time, going to a restaurant, the kids are all on their phones or doing their games on their iPads, and the parents are talking, but the parents, you can see they're almost like relieved. Like,
Yeah.
the technology is better than a babysitter because I don't have to pay attention to my kid.
Right.
So, it's kind of the lazy way out, but it's also very negligent because
Well,
you
yeah.
should say, put the phone down. Let's talk. Tell me about how you're feeling today about school.
Exactly.
Right.
We had the
Yeah.
round table. Kids came home from school and they sat at the round table and we had tea.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought
Mm-hmm.
friends with them. And then at dinner that night, tell us about your day. And even if the
Mm-hmm.
awkward conversations come up, Mom was a
Mm-hmm.
homosexual, and you
Right.
think,
Right.
okay, age appropriate here, and
Mm-hmm.
describe what it is. Never shut anything down. Never.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
the moment we shut their inquiry down, they
Mm-hmm.
become scared to inquire more. And it's
Yeah.
like give them what they need to hear at age appropriate. But
Mm-hmm.
the one of the things that adult humans have lost is a beautiful sense of wonderment, of
Mm-hmm.
inquisitiveness, of a sense of adventure. And this is why
Mm-hmm.
we have so many walking dead in the world, as you call them,
Mm-hmm.
the linear people, just doing the
Right.
same thing, like on a treadmill, over and over
Right.
again and convincing themselves they're happy. And they don't want
Mm-hmm.
to go wander off that because,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm too scared. I don't know what else is out there. Well, that's
Right.
part of the excitement. If you
Yes.
go with your antennas on, but the
Mm-hmm.
antennas are going to tell you whether it's dangerous or not. But go with the anticipation and of wondering of what's the discovery going
Mm-hmm.
to be.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Mm-hmm.
going to discover things about ourselves. I started podcasting at the age of 57. When somebody asked me to join her network and do a podcast, I go, what's that? I had no idea.
Mm.
No
Wow.
idea it was online. I've got to do it by the computer. And the first
Mm-hmm.
30 months when I was with her, it was all live. It was a great training ground. And then I
What
started
year
my
was
own.
that?
That was
What year was
12,
that?
2012.
Oh wow, you were really ahead of the trend. I mean,
Was,
it really started to boom, well,
yeah.
especially during the pandemic.
Oh God, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody has one, yes. And
Well, everyone has a phone, so you can do a
yeah, well,
podcast,
and of
right?
course, yeah, I don't go to phone, good old
Right.
computer, but
Right. Right.
it is, I didn't know what I could do. And I've
Yeah.
taught myself into jobs in my life where I've gone
Uh,
in. I was the first woman rep for Mobile Oil in South Africa. I didn't know a
wow.
thing about oil, but I knew, but I mean, just my personality got the job. They sent me
Yeah.
somewhere off for training. I still was over my head.
Yeah.
because actually I only have grade 7 education. Through my illness, I missed so much schooling.
Mhm.
And so, but I knew customer service. And the thing is,
Yes.
I knew how to listen to people to what they needed,
Right.
right? And really,
Yeah.
all business is about what does your customer
Communication.
need?
Yes.
Communication and relationships.
Right.
And we've got so scared to have those relationships.
Yes.
We've forgotten
Yes.
how to communicate because we headline nowadays. You see
Yeah.
headlines come up and we don't bother to read the content or
I
even in
know.
the right context,
Yes,
right?
yes. We've lost our critical thinking
Yes.
skills, but also, I do worry about the younger generation
Yes.
and the teenagers and children today, and even the people in their 20s and 30s that um, I think they really struggle because they didn't have that strong social interaction that was kids had back in the 70s and the
Mm,
60s and even the 80s and
mm,
90s. I mean, our kids, they just made the cut. Our kids were born in the early 90s. So that, when I was raising them as teenagers, yes, of course, we had the internet, but we didn't have smartphones yet. And
right.
that was a big deal.
Yeah.
So I know it's hard for parents. I mean, I don't envy them. I think parents today have a really hard job in this world of bullying
Yeah.
and the fastness of,
Cyberbullying.
yes. And I know that there is just an ache in the heart of so many teenagers and 20 somethings right now. And we're seeing it reflected in the suicide rate and
Yeah.
in the depression rate and the anxiety rate. Even one could argue the ADHD rate.
Mm,
Kids aren't getting out and just running with their friends. And, when I grew up in the summer, we were out the door by
yes.
9 o'clock and we
Yeah.
were whistled in at sunset. We were
Yeah.
whistled in, and the
Yes.
whole day was spent socializing with other children. No, we were not watching TV. We were riding bikes. We were skateboarding. We were sledding. We were skiing. We were conversing.
Yes.
And I think it's just an innate need of human beings that we are social animals and we need to connect with our peers and have those exchanges, or else we kind of wither up and die. It's like a flower without water or sunlight. And that's what I feel so many of our kids right now. It's like their spirits are
Mm,
just drying up. Like, please feed me.
yeah.
And who knows, maybe that is part of the
Of the
whole
shift.
new earth as
Yeah.
well, is that they will realize,
They're thirsty.
because of their exactly.
Mm.
Hmm.
I would say that you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Hmm.
However, you leave it there long enough and it's going to realize it's thirsty.
Yes, yes,
And
that's
what we're
right.
seeing right now is I have a grandson of nearly 2, and he's only allowed a little bit of Sesame Street
Hmm.
now and again. He FaceTimes me. He asks to FaceTime me
Hmm.
when I'm not there. Otherwise, no apparatuses for him.
That's good.
And I see people who have given their babies the phones, and what they don't
Hmm.
realize the neurological damage they're doing to that child.
That's
It's
right.
almost like
Yeah.
brainwashing. And then that
Yes.
child has no cognitive interaction with anyone else. And
Yep.
it's really dangerous. My kids are 34 to 40, and they're
Hmm.
all very outgoing, all
Hmm.
very social.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but I think they were lucky enough to have themselves and put on plays and
Yeah.
go and do things, explore life. And
Right.
and I was used to be out there with my pram and my dolls walking the
Yes.
streets.
Me
But
too. Me
but
too.
but back in those days, people weren't scared about the pedophile neighbor or
I
the this or
know.
the white van. And it's because I've done shows on
Yeah.
sex trafficking and things like this. And back in
Yeah.
2016, when I did that show, it was $150 billion a year industry, the sex trade.
Oh.
And this is if we're not paying attention to that disease,
Hmm.
why is it so
Hmm.
much? It's because
Yeah.
the demand is there. Well, why is there demand there? And we've got to
Mm.
look at, we don't pay attention to root cause. right?
Right.
And we don't
Right.
realize that so many people are empty because their spirits have not been ignited.
Yes.
And we need to
Yes.
ignite that heart and soul and spirit so they
Mm-hmm.
start raising that consciousness and they start feeling. When you're in a level of love consciousness, you
Mm-hmm.
can't knowingly do harm to someone else, for to do so would
Mm-hmm.
hurt you.
Mm-hmm. It's something I think about pretty much every week. I'll think about this, about, the nature of evil, the nature of criminality,
Yeah.
why, the reality is we are in a world, and by the way, I would never let my kids when they were younger go out the door
Mm,
at 9 o'clock and whistle them home at sunset. I never did that, but my parents could do that.
yes.
That's not to say there weren't those issues going on back then, but I
They were
definitely
just few
think
and far between.
exactly they might, and that again is with technology and
Yeah.
whatnot. But you know, I damned if I know the answer, but I do know that there are dark, monstrous souls out there. There are some very evil, dangerous entities out there who walk amongst us.
Yeah.
And I struggle a lot, which is one of the reasons why I want people to read this book and just escape. Because
Yes.
don't we need an escape right now?
We
I
do,
mean,
but
let's,
it's escapism, but into realism as well.
yeah,
Because
exactly.
when we look back of how easy it was just to throw, especially a woman, into an asylum, and how
Mhm.
ill-equipped and how ill-treated and how unsophisticated, how everything was so wrong with it. Nothing right
Yes,
with it. That nobody was
right,
getting the help, nobody was getting the treatment. It was just another form of prison, of
right.
an
And
excuse to get rid of people, right?
yeah, yeah, and you're right that in the book, it's part of what I call the ungilded series, as
Mm,
opposed to the Gilded Age. It takes
mm,
place during the Gilded Age in New York City. And we see the TV series and many
yes,
romance novels where,
yeah,
oh, they happen to be a beautiful heiress living in a mansion in the Gilded Age. But what about the underbelly, which was actually the vast majority of people during the Gilded Age? What
yes,
about the destitute, the homeless,
yes,
the prostitutes, the criminals? What about the working class, the
yeah,
blue collar,
yeah,
the immigrants that made America? How did they live? How did they eat? How hard was it for them to live?
yeah.
And so it's a very gritty book because I did a sorry, there's the elevator hammer again. I did a lot of research about how people really lived in the Bowery district of New York
Mm,
City, the poor people. And Maggie, uh, I start out, the first part of the book is called the girl in the hole, because she literally lives in a hole. She lives in a crawl space beneath a tenement building in this squalid Bowery district of New York City. And the drippings of the horse dung and
uh,
the garbage come into her little hole there where she lives, and it's all she can afford. But somebody asked me lately, he said, well, I guess life for the wealthy women was much better back then for than the life of the poor woman. And I said, well, it's all relative,
mm,
because the life of a poor, destitute woman during the Gilded Age was hard, and they were vulnerable prey to the predators,
yes,
wanting them for prostitution or whatever, and they were not given opportunities. No, they couldn't get educated. They
no,
couldn't they couldn't even vote until
right,
1920. Um, but keep in mind, the wealthy women, they may have had their luxuries, but their life, in my opinion, still sucked.
because they
Because
didn't have freedom.
they didn't have any freedom. They
They
couldn't
didn't
say
have
their
freedom to
opinions.
be, it's
They didn't have any personal power,
nope,
where they and even the way they dressed. I
yeah,
mean, you look at those
corsets,
photos. The core.
yes,
I have a blog on my Anika Savoy author site, and one of the recent posts is about the murderous corsets of the Gilded Age,
oh,
because back then women died from
well,
corsets.
as
Did
an
you know that?
asthmatic, I would have been for sure.
That's right. It
Yeah,
reduced the lung capacity.
yeah,
And sometimes when they would do, there's that banging again.
yeah.
Are
Don't
you
worry.
able to hear me okay? Okay,
Yes.
there. At least I'll have an elevator to go up and stairs to my bedroom when I'm old and frail. Um, but they did autopsies on people who had died, and women who wore corsets all their lives, and their ribs were actually deformed.
Yes.
They had skeletal deformities from these tight-laced corsets.
But it's also what they
So
did to the intestines as well.
yes,
Yeah.
well, you've really read up on this,
Yeah.
Sarah.
But it's also like the Chinese, where they used to put women in
Yes,
small shoes. And
and they
that was
couldn't
so
walk.
they couldn't walk and couldn't run away from them.
I know,
So every time you
terrible.
look at anything that is considered
Mhm.
fashion, look to that
Mm.
it is a man that has devised it as a form of control over the women. Now, why do
Yes.
men need so much control over women in such a horrific
Mhm.
way? What is the
Mhm.
fear of the woman? Well, women generally come from love. Love is
Mm.
something they always seek. Love is something they always give. Love is
Mhm.
something they always nurture out. It's generally innate in them, right?
Mhm.
With a man, it's not so obvious. It becomes more about prestige or more about um, image, the ego.
Yeah.
And so we need to change the way we raise our sons so they're
Yes.
not feeding that way. And we need to change the way we raising our daughters into believing they can do anything they damn well want,
Yes. Don't
right?
expect your knight in shining armor to
No,
come and rescue you because
no, it's
it
rusty.
ain't
It's
it's
rusty.
not going to happen.
No,
Right. Right.
definitely not.
But I like the bumper sticker I once read. It said, "I'm not a feminist. I'm a human being." And
Exactly.
that's how I feel. I feel
Yeah.
like I actually personally in my own life, if you look at all my experiences with men and women, I have a history of having better experiences with men than with women. So when you say women are come from a place of love, the good women I know
Yes.
come from a place of love. But I've had some exposure to women who are who could be very mean women.
A
That's a
spiteful
real
woman is
thing.
more dangerous than a man.
Oh,
Uh,
hell hath no fury.
oh, absolutely. And
And
when a woman ignores, but let's face it, anybody that's living in spite or wishing harm or narcissism or sociopath or anything like that, it's all to do with the inner child and the fact that they haven't ignited their heart. When you open up your heart, even to feel the pain, you
mhm,
understand the love, and they're too scared
uh-huh.
to feel the pain and they want
Yes.
to suppress the love. It actually takes more courage to step into your heart and open it up to all the
Mhm,
pain, which
mhm.
will show you the love, than to turn into the embitterment and the nastiness of what humans can be. The
Yes.
people that really go out and harm each other
Mhm.
without any conscience, they don't have a heart and soul conscience. It is
Right.
not open because
Yes.
there is no accountability for them. How can there be? You have to have a conscience to have accountability.
Yes. I remember when I was in law school, I was going through a really difficult time with my family of origin and was estranged from them and grappling with that estrangement, which ended up continuing for the rest of my life and being a very important, healthy thing for me. It was actually a blessing in disguise.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I remember saying to her, how come I'm in so much pain about this? How come I'm so upset about this loss in this situation? And they don't seem to care at all.
Yeah,
And I'll never forget what she said to me. She said, "You're more healed than they are."
yeah,
And that was interesting. You mean when I experience grief and pain because I'm feeling it in the moment,
mm-hmm.
that's actually a sign of healing? You mean
Mm-hmm.
I'm allowed to experience this? And when
Yes,
I suppress it, I'm doing it out of fear and I'm blocking the healing process?
and doing
That was
yourself a
a,
disservice.
yes. And I remember another thing she said to me. I said, I feel like I'm wasting my time here coming every week where all I do is get angry
Mm,
and say, why did they do this? Why did they do that?
mm.
What? And she said, Anne, anger is like a fire. The more you throw on it, the more it burns. But eventually it'll start to dwindle down and the fire will die. But first, you need to get the fire out. You need to get the anger out. You need to express that anger and have a safe place. The key is to have a safe place to
There's another,
express your anger.
there's another point with that, though. By throwing the anger on the fire and letting it burn away,
Mm-hmm.
you are eliminating that anger from you, for now it
Right.
is ashes.
Exactly. Exactly. You're kind of like exercising the demons or
You are. You are.
detoxifying yourself, getting the poison out of your system because anger is a poison
Yeah.
if you keep it in your heart and don't get it out.
And the thing is, um, we were given emotions for a reason. And we're meant to
Mhm.
spend those emotions. Understand, why am I feeling like this right now?
Mhm.
Spend the emotion, but don't become emotional over the emotions. And this is something we're
Right.
inclined to do. We're inclined to, like, I'm angry. Why am I angry? And they stay in that
Mhm.
constant thing of anger. By throwing the anger kind of on the fire
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
going, I'm angry at this. I'm angry at that. Spend the anger, let it turn to ashes, and then say to yourself, now I'm free of anger.
And that's the key, Sarah, is to say, you have closure. Now
Yes.
I'm free of it. Now, if
Yeah.
it creeps up again, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world. Obviously, you have a little bit more anger to get out. Let
Yeah.
it, every time it creeps up, let it do it. But the key is don't get into this rumination,
Mm,
this habitual mental rut
yeah.
of replaying in your mind all of your heartaches, all of your disappointments, all of your regrets, all of your feelings of revenge or whatever. Don't get addicted to your anger. And
Yeah.
that's what you see some people doing that, where you just get into a bad habit. It's just a bad mental habit. And the other day I woke up and I found myself thinking about a couple of things in my life that made me angry. And I stopped myself and I said, how is this helping you? You've
Mm,
thought about these things before. You've exhausted this subject. You've already resolved it. Now,
mm.
for God's sake, just let it go. Replace these thoughts with some good thoughts. Okay, what
Yes.
am I going to do today? You know, and then replace it. So there's also a really just, practical way of reorienting your mind and being self-aware of what your thoughts are and how they're controlling your emotions, and then
Mm.
saying, I'm going to uh, take a U-turn and I'm going to go in a different direction and get away from this because it's only making me miserable. It's not good for my soul. It's not good for my mental health. Put it aside and turn into the next street and go in another direction.
You know, what we seed and how we water it and how we
Mm-hmm.
nurture it is what's going to grow. So I think we
Mm-hmm.
need to be very mindful of what we're seeding, right?
Yes.
And,
Yes.
just plant the seeds that you want to see grow. You don't need to plant the whole garden, right?
Right.
Just plant the seeds that you want to see grow right now. And each time
Mm-hmm.
that grows and fortifies, the next you can maybe plant a few more things and let
Mm-hmm.
it grow. It's some people, well, I'm going to plant the entire garden, and then it becomes overwhelming and your energy hasn't matched that level yet. So you've
Yes.
got to allow your energy to ascend at the level, because you've got to also understand, as you're ascending into that higher consciousness, it has to heal. It has to
Right.
heal what has been before. So it will heal up to that level. And that garden looks beautiful with those flowers. Now you can seed another, and then you'll grow up to another level. And at every level that you grow up to higher, it becomes the
Mm-hmm.
healing, right? Now, that
It's
doesn't mean you're
true.
going to be completely all healed. People
Mm-hmm.
say to me, well, if you're so spiritual, why do you have these illnesses? Right?
Right.
Or why do you suffer from depression? And I said, well, my
Right.
depression comes from watching humanity destroy itself.
Yes.
That is
Yes.
like when we're so capable of being such incredible human beings,
Yes.
and yet we choose to be so disgusting towards each other.
Yes.
That is depressing, right? And
Yes.
and my
Yes.
illness, as I said, was to keep my energy level at a level that others can receive.
Right. And when you read all the great Indian wisdom, when when people go to their teachers, to
Mhm.
their yogis, one of the most common themes is the student is seeking a definitive answer from
Mhm.
the yogi, and the yogi says, figure it out yourself.
Yes.
And the person says, should I do this, should I do that?
Mm.
You see, it's all again linear, it's all achievement oriented, it's all what do I need to do, like as if
Yes.
you need to graduate with an A+ so you can get to the
Right.
next course. And
Yeah.
that's how human beings think, and that's how in many ways we have to think that way to have a functioning society, to go to medical school and
Mm.
become a doctor. But the flip side is that when you're dealing with the spiritual realm, it's not about it's not a hierarchy,
No.
and when you see someone who's in a dark place, you can tell yourself, that's where they need to be now. I
Yeah.
hope they go, but that's where they're at right now, and that's okay. And this is where I'm at right now, and that's okay. And then you see someone who's doing so much better, seemingly, than you on their spiritual journey, and you say, that's where they are, and I'm happy for them. I'm not there. I don't
Mhm.
have to strive to be like them
Right.
or get to that point. When it happens, it will happen. But it's just kind of this mindset of chill
Yes.
out,
Be
chill out, and just
present.
be,
Yeah. Yeah.
just be.
Well, that's the point. It's not the do. You're not the
Mhm,
doing. You are the
mhm.
being.
The being, you are a human
Yeah.
being.
And the
Exactly.
being that is doing something. Um,
Right.
but so many people put the emphasis on the doing that will make me something instead of
Hmm.
being something that you do. And
Hmm.
it's, I think, again, a lot of what I speak about, which I'm sure you do too, of the work that you do, is we have become conditioned to
Hmm.
fit this agenda of what we should be.
Hmm.
And from the word go, from the moment we're born, you can't do this, you can't do this, you got to be this, you got to be that. You're not going to
Hmm.
be loved if you're not this, if you're not educated, if you haven't got a good job, if you haven't got a good money, if you haven't got a good marriage, if you haven't got this,
I
if you haven't
know.
got that,
I
you are
know.
nothing. Uh, and so we've placed all our self-worth on this exterior expectation. But
And
when we
it's
go,
false. Yeah,
it's
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 it's an
wrong.
illusion.
It is, but nobody can live up to
Right.
that.
Well, here's the thing, Sarah, is I don't want to live up to
No,
it because number one, it's not very fun.
no.
But number two is, have you ever gone to a funeral of someone who was a very high achieving person but wasn't well? A lot of people didn't like that
Yes.
person, and even though, but they go to their funeral anyway because they had a lot of power. So you go to that funeral, you go because they were the mayor and they were
Yeah.
the CEO of whatever or whatever. And so you go to the funeral of someone who was a high powered person but lived life in that linear way. It was all
Yeah.
about ego,
Power, power,
obtaining
power,
things,
power,
or
power.
power,
Yeah.
power, power. And the funeral, you see, no one's shedding a tear. No
No.
one's shedding a tear. People are getting up, oh, he achieved this, he achieved that, he made this money, he was the first to do this, and everyone's just nodding off,
Yeah.
and then you go to the funeral of a beautiful soul who may not have had any achievements in
Yeah.
life. I mean, heck, the guy may have been the homeless guy that
Yeah.
who always was on the corner and he told you stories, but people will say, here's how he touched my life.
Yes.
And then you hear he did this and no one knew it, but he did
Right.
this or she did that. And you can really, it's not always true because some people don't have the funerals that they should have, but
Yeah.
you can usually tell when you go to a memorial service or a funeral, when the people stand up and speak from the heart, or when you read their obituary and all the comments under it, you can really tell the difference between, oh yeah, he was a really well respected man, to, my God, she gave me hot chocolate before school every morning,
Yes.
and you know what I mean, things like that. So
Well,
so
it's not, how the person impresses you. It's how do they make you
mhm.
feel? We
Yes.
want to feel, and we've become a society of being scared of our feelings. Um,
Hmm.
in little Maggie's time of, being thrown into asylum or just being throwaway people. That's really what they were,
Mm.
just throwaway people.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Um, to express one's feelings was something dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
But we're in an era now that through social media we can come together and express our feelings and
Mm-hmm.
come together and support with one another and come and have each other's backs because people have
Mm-hmm.
forgotten how to feel. At the same time, they feel if I feel and somebody knows how I feel, I'm going to be vulnerable. They're going to attack
Mm-hmm.
me. Well, there's two things in that. It is only when you are vulnerable that you can truly feel. The other
Mm-hmm.
is when you're on that higher consciousness of love, you're in an algorithm of love.
Mm-hmm.
And those
Mm-hmm.
people, no matter what they want to say or do, can't touch you because they're on the lower level
Mm-hmm.
and you're on this level. And so
Mm-hmm.
no matter what they say or do, can't have an effect on you, not with the
Yeah.
people that know
Mm-hmm.
you as that love.
Well, that's why, childhood is so hard for so many people
Yeah.
because as adults, we have the empowerment to be able to say, I've been vulnerable with this person
Mm.
and they tore my heart to shreds.
Right.
And so now I know, lesson learned.
Right.
Now, don't and see the red flags in the future if someone starts to do those little ha
Yeah.
insults. You're looking a little heavy in the butt these days, ha ha.
Yeah.
That hurt my feelings,
Yeah.
and you start to know when who to stay away from. Just there, the
Mm.
reality is we do need to be very careful. We can't
Yes.
wear our heart on our sleeve, or else we'll get just torn to shreds, which is really what happened to me growing up. Is that you can't you can't escape. So it's as a child you can't
No,
escape the
it's hard.
family background that you're in, and
Yeah.
and and if you're a sensitive soul and you're
Mm.
you're and you're spiritually inclined, and
Hmm.
that kind of negativity can really tear you apart. And it's just so important as you get older, once you have the means to move away, to seek out people like you who are moving in the same direction, who crave the same things, and who build you up, who
Yes.
builds you up. And that's the thing. You're talking about men not understanding women, but a lot of
Mm.
times women tear other women down.
Yes.
And that's actually part of being in a patriarchal society. When women don't have power, they attack other women. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like that rather than say something's wrong with the system, they go after, they can, this doesn't always happen, but women can attack women. So it's just really important to know the danger signs and separate yourself from that, and then move on to more positive relationships.
You'll find your circle will grow smaller, because you're then surrounded by people that you feel you can be yourself with, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'll find even the work that you do or the reasons why you do your work will change, right?
Exactly.
It's not about the accolades. It's not about this or that. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's about getting the message across, or it's about the
Exactly.
story that's going to change someone's life. You've written a story that's based over 100 years ago, but people reading this story, somebody might be spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
somebody may be suffering from mental challenges.
Mm-hmm.
We all are in some way, but some
Of
people may be
course.
having some sort of struggle. And
Mm-hmm.
for them to actually know, thank God I'm not in those times. Thank God
Yes.
I'm in the times where there are resources for me. Thank God that
Right.
there are times where I can actually step into my spiritual gift and not feel
Yes.
ridiculed or burnt at the stake, right? And so
Yes.
sometimes by reading these stories, entertaining, it could be
Yes.
illuminating, eye-opening for sure. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, I think it's a time then for it to sit with you and be grateful that times
Exactly.
have changed. Do
Well,
they still need to change? Yes. And can you be a part of that change? Yes.
exactly. That's the word I was about to say, was grateful,
Mm.
because I am so grateful to live in a democracy where, at least in theory, women are given every opportunity that men are given. In
Mm.
theory, we have the, we more than theory, we can get educated, we can
Yeah.
make our own money, but to be aware that it's not just, thank God I didn't live 100 years
Yeah.
ago, because I could have been suffering like Maggie did in the book. But thank God I don't live in Afghanistan or
Yes.
Iran or
Yes.
or Russia.
Mm.
You see the people there. Journalists come. What do you think of the war? I can't talk. I can't talk.
Yes.
They are not allowed to have an opinion.
No.
And what a terrible way to live.
Yes.
So thank God that times are evolving and that democracy is growing at a faster rate than ever. I was worried that the autocracies were starting to move back in,
Mm.
and definitely there are some awful autocracies out there, but democracy is I believe part of the new earth as well, at least the paradigm of democracy.
I completely agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
But we've also, talked earlier about disruption and the universe shaking us up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why we're seeing so much resistance from certain people, war
Mm-hmm.
or mostly, misogynistic, wanting to
Mm-hmm.
Roe versus Wade and wanting women
Yep.
barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen again,
Mm-hmm.
which is just not going to happen. We're far too far advanced. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but this is that last cry to keep things the same,
Yes.
to keep the power, because they're afraid they're going to lose their power. If they could stop and just be present with self and take the inside journey, they would actually understand they are more powerful in the empowerment of
Mm-hmm.
supporting women, of supporting each
Yes.
other, with letting the
Yes.
status ego go, and
Yes.
and that this fear that they're so busy trying to defend in this
Uh-huh.
righteous way, which is such a hypocrisy, is
Uh-huh.
actually, is a resistance that is futile.
It's futile, and also from a point of self-interest, because we are all self-interested people
Mm.
ultimately. um, if you want to be happy, if you want to, I'm not saying you're going to be happy, like always happy and have an easy life, but if you want to have peace and contentment and purpose and just feel good on a day-to-day basis, then go that route, go the spiritual route, start the seeking. Even if you've never even started before, start reading these
Yes,
books, start
yes,
to, meditating, maybe take up a yoga, I don't know, or just go for a walk along the seashore, and you will find that this way of life, it's like the difference between eating a McDonald's
mm,
junky hamburger and having a nice healthy chef prepared organic meal. Like,
mm,
why would you? And so you talk a lot about fear. People are afraid to take that leap, but the paradox is you should be afraid to stay in that space. You should not be afraid to take that leap, because you'll feel so much better. You'll
yes,
be so much happier. You may even have lowered your blood pressure.
yes. Well, I call it rebirthing ourselves,
Yes.
and the thing is, there's a 9 month gestation and then the actual birthing. And yes, it can be uncomfortable. Um, it can be all of those things. If anybody's had a baby,
Mm-hmm.
they'll understand. And then the actual birthing can be painful, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
when that baby's in your arms, you've forgotten everything. So
Right.
why can't we look at it as birthing ourselves? And then
And
when
we
you hold
birth
yourself in your
ourselves.
own arms, yeah, and you
We
see
we
that love of self.
Yeah, we rebirth
Yes,
ourselves when you think about it,
yeah,
over and over and over. And we represent, as human beings on this earth, that recycling energy, which I believe is what reincarnation is all about. But we rebirth over and over throughout our lives. So you
mm,
may go through a period in your life where it's a very dark period, or a period that's very worldly, and it's worldly for a reason. You had to get that career and be ambitious and be materialistic, but now it's time to rebirth. But
yeah.
that's the other thing. For a time, my husband and I were evangelical Christians, like, and
Mhm.
in our youth, in our 20s. And this concept of you must be born again.
Hmm.
It's true, you must be born again, but it's not a one-time altar call.
Right.
It's a being born again every day. Because,
Mm.
if you're like me, sometimes I'll go through ruts where for a few years, I'm just not really quite with it. Like I'm on the, and then I get back and
Yeah,
turn in the other direction and rebirth, as you say. So it's an ongoing rebirthing, really until the day we die.
exactly. Um, it's finding that beautiful rhythm, that beautiful
Mm-hmm.
cosmic spiritual rhythm in which to ride. And it's going to
Mm-hmm.
take you, on slight up and downs. What we don't want is the roller coaster of extreme highs and lows.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the spirit or the divine cannot talk through a closed heart. The heart has
Right.
to open. The way to open the heart is to get back into nature. Listen to the birds
Mm-hmm.
singing, the wind blowing through your hair, brushing away the cobwebs, the water of the ocean lapping
Yes.
onto the land, children laughing, puppy dogs chasing sticks.
Yes. Yes.
Start feeling your face smiling, start feeling your
Yes.
heart warming. And whether your heart has multiple million cracks, don't worry about it. It
Yes.
it heals. And those cracks
Mhm.
never go. They're just kind of filled with gold. And it just
Right?
shows you that they're held together. They are your experiences that defines who you are today. No one else defines you. Only you
Right.
do. And it
Right.
comes from your experiences, your choices. You don't always choose what happens to you, but you choose what you do with it and who
Yes.
you are today. So while you're feeding everything, feed yourself from the inside out. And when you live from that inside out, when you live from that soul, heart, spirit, it is a
Hmm.
place of such truth, of such
Hmm.
divine honesty, of such presence, of such essence. It is like being
Hmm.
up there in the universe,
Yes.
just in the body.
Right. Right. And I read all sorts of different books from different types of faiths. And the Bible has a lot of good stuff. Like knock and the door shall be open, ask and you shall receive, and I believe that, so many, we've already kind of touched on this. We feel like we have to do it. We have to
Yeah.
figure it out. We have to chase after God. But it's no, we are recipients
Yes.
of that energy. And you may not want to call it God. That's fine. The older I get, the more troubled I get with just that term God.
Mm.
It's
God,
that
universe, spirit, right? Energy,
right,
whatever
right.
you want to
Let's
call
just
it.
say
Source.
love.
Yes,
Yes,
love.
source love. But you have to, all you have to do. My husband and I went to a Ukrainian mass recently at a Catholic church, and I hadn't been in a Catholic church for so long. And as I knelt praying, I just said, God, resurrect my soul.
Mm,
Just resurrect my soul. And I remember saying that when I was in college and I was in a very dark place searching. God, if you're real, show yourself to me. Come to me. So that's what you have to do when if you're at a loss and you're not having these experiences in your life, then just make the silent prayer, but do it from your heart. Show me who you are. And if you ask, you will receive.
and
If you show your intention to the universe,
mm,
I need something more. I need you to show me your plan, your my reason on this earth. So many people nowadays take their own lives
mm,
because they just think, what's the point?
yeah,
Well, all you have to do is ask.
yes,
And I'm not saying it's going to come to you like Moses and the
right,
tablets,
yeah,
it's not going to be a preacher suddenly saying something that changes your whole world. It's going to be a serenity that will come over you. Maybe you'll meet people that day who will give you
hmm,
answers that, so just ask. That's all you need to do. You don't have to work for it. You don't have to sacrifice it for it. You just have to ask.
the process of igniting the God within you, right?
Mm-hmm.
The God is within you. We are
Yes.
made up of the particles.
Mm-hmm.
are the same
Mm-hmm.
as God, source, energy, wisdom, universe, whichever you want to call it. We are all made up of that material. What we're asking is to ignite it, ignite it
Yes.
with it, that we are conscious of it,
Mm-hmm.
that we can
Mm-hmm.
walk with it, that it walks with
Mm-hmm.
us, that channeling of the wisdom is always our guidance system, and that
Mm-hmm.
our heart is always our generator. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have the compass, we have the generator. When we have the right intent, when then we just
Mm-hmm.
be. You want love,
Mm-hmm.
be the love. You want peace, be the peace.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You
Mm-hmm.
want wisdom, allow it to come through you. You
Mm-hmm.
want to be of purpose, discover
Mm-hmm.
that purpose, because the passion of who you are, when your heart, soul, spirit, mind, and body become one, then
Mm-hmm.
you cannot walk away from that passion, that purpose, because you are it.
Once you know it and experience it, there's no going back.
No,
Because you don't want to go back.
no,
Why
you've
would you ever want
ignited
to go back?
yourself. Yeah,
Right.
you have
Yeah,
become. You have become.
exactly. Exactly.
Now, we're going
So,
to have you back on again with your
oh,
other books. Um,
yeah.
you've done a book on a young Ukrainian lady
Mm-hmm.
that is staying with you and all the horrors that she's had to live through in
Mm-hmm.
Ukraine, and I want to talk about that. You've done another book on a serial killer, um,
Yes.
and we won't. We're just going to touch on that and rather lead people to all the documentary that's done on it, because I know you're tired of having to reiterate that story. Um, but we're going to have you back to talk about those books as well, which
Okay.
are all intertwined in a way, right? Because if we don't ignite our heart, soul, and our consciousness, our loving
Mm-hmm.
consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
then we're not going to be able to get through things, or we're going to go and
Mm-hmm.
do things that harms other people because we're hurt. So
Right.
it's kind of the underlaying there is that
Yes.
self-love allows you to love others. It
Mm-hmm.
shows you how to love others. So in the meantime, I love, how do people get hold of your new book, The Ghost in Her?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful little Maggie story there. And also,
Yeah.
how did they get hold of you on your site? And is there anything you're particularly
Okay.
offering right now?
Well, they can just find it on Amazon, whether it's in the UK or Canada or America on Amazon. You will just look up The Ghost in Her by Anika Savoy, and you can find it right there, or
Can you
any
spell
of
your
the,
name, love, for people who are just listening?
sure, Anikasavoy. And
Wonderful.
so if you were to look up The Ghost in Her by Anika Savoy on Amazon, you will immediately find it. It's also with the many other online outlets. The Audible version, I highly recommend. You can get that on various Audible outlets, including Audible with Amazon. The Irish narrator did a great job with
Mm,
the she's actually, I think she's Australian, but she gave the Irish accent for Maggie. She really brought the character to life.
wonderful.
And my website is anikasavoyauthor.com. And on that site, it has the nonfiction that I've written under my other name, Ann K. Howard, plus this first book in the Ungilded series. It's with a good publisher, Inkspell Publishing. So you could also just go to any Barnes and Noble or whatever bookstores you have in England, or and just ask that they order it if it's not on the shelf.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We learn, from what I call faction. You've written a
Mm-hmm.
fictional tale based on fact. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, when you come away from a book, because I think that's why this is called an author's kiss. It is like a
Mm-hmm.
kiss. It is something that stays with you. But it should be something that you were stimulated by the story, but it left you food for thought. And
Yes.
whether it's something you related to or whether it's something you didn't know, that puts things into
Yeah.
perspective, that's what a good book does. And so
Yeah.
most certainly, um, this is an encouragement to read that book, not
Mhm.
only for dear little Maggie's story, and also, but for the how far we have come, yet still how far we've still got to go.
Mhm.
But it's also, can you imagine just, wanting to have a roof over your head, food in your
Mm.
belly, a job that you can cope with, or if you are going for some mental anxiety, that there is somebody there to actually help you through it and not throwing
Mm-hmm.
you away. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
there's actually a wonderful TV show called Vienna Blood,
Oh,
which is Masterpiece Theatre. Highly
ah.
recommended.
Oh, I'm
Um,
going to write it down right now.
no, it's very, very good. And it's actually a young guy who studies under Freud, but he's a psychiatrist and he works with a cop to solve murders. And
Mm-hmm.
but it's the psychological approach to him right in the early 1900s. And so
Fascinating.
it's really fascinating, very well done. And
Mm-hmm.
it looks a little bit into the asylum where they put people in cages.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, a person is trapped within themselves, their own mental anguish, then you put them in a cage.
Worst thing
Right.
you could do, or in an
Exactly.
ice cold bath, or,
Right.
and I just, it popped into my head this amazing book I read years ago called The Hospital, written by, I believe it was an English woman who was sent to a psychiatric hospital and locked up there when she was a teenager. Mainly because she wasn't wanted, and the
Mm.
horrors that went on there, mainly over medicating
Yeah.
the children, but also sexual
Yes.
rape at the hands of the psychiatrist.
Mm.
So these things happen to this day, and we have to be ever vigilant about making sure they don't continue to happen.
Yes. And unfortunately,
Repeat.
some things are still happening.
Yep.
And we think, oh, in this day and age, no, no.
Mm,
There's
yep.
a lot that goes behind the veil. And if we're willing
Mm,
to pull back that veil and see,
mm,
um,
mm,
and then we actually kind of see the horrors that are happening.
yeah.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of society that has become very, very sick.
Mhm,
But we've allowed that sickness. And because we were not willing to observe it or do something about it, or we think
mhm,
we've done something about it,
mhm,
it still continues
mhm,
on. So again, what you
mhm.
feed will grow, and that goes for solutions as well. Feed the solutions
Yes.
and let them grow. It's
Right.
been a delight talking to you here. I
Same
know we've
here.
had some technical problems, um,
Ah.
but in the next show we won't. It'll be nice and smooth. So, folks,
Oh yeah.
I'll let you know when she's going to be back again, but we're definitely going to be talking about her other book and continue this conversation.
Very
Uh,
good.
I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. We've taken you on quite a few dimensions here today. A lot of food for thought. Don't forget to share the show and also like those book clubs, you can have a book club over the book, but have a podcast
Oh,
club as well, where you can discuss
yes.
what we've talked about here today and each share your own perspective. That is how we expand minds. Everybody's
Right.
sharing their own understanding. Nobody's
Mm-hmm.
understanding is more right or wrong. It is about
Mm-hmm.
your perspective. And if we're willing to open up and listen to each other, then we get
Mm-hmm.
a bigger picture to understand.
Amen.
Thanks so much. Until
Thank
next
you,
time.
Sarah.
Oh, my pleasure. Until next time, folks. Bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. Find all of our shows on selfdiscoverymedia.com under podcasts or self-discovery-media/shows. And for all our current shows, go to What's New. We are supported by you, the audience. You'll see a nice big shiny blue button for one-time donations or follow us on Patreon and you will be able to support us there. We enjoy bringing you such wisdom. And the next show will be up in just a moment.